Upfront and Outspoken with Bob Williams. If you love the Constitution,
man is not free unless government is limited.
If you love freedom,
as government expands, liberty contracts.
If you believe in personal responsibility, if you believe America is still the greatest nation on earth, then get ready for an experience you'll never forget. This is Upfront and Outspoken. Here's your host, Bob Williams.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
And welcome back. This is, of course, Upfront Outspoken. I'm your host, Bob Williams, with you here on this Wednesday. Now, I had intended to both get Fred Brauer of the Fred Brauer Report and Jonathan Wolfman, the host of Passionate Justice, to talk about the Netanyahu speech. But unfortunately, we don't know what is going on. Jonathan's not able to join us. We're trying to make contact with him, but for some odd reason, looks like he finally came in.
I'm here.
All right, so let's bring them both on. With me via Skype is, of course, Fred Brauer, the Fred Brauer Report, and Jonathan Wolfman, host of Passionate Justice. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning. Do you hear me?
Oh, we hear you with no problem, Jonathan.
There he is. Good morning, John. Morning, Bob.
Hey, Fred.
All right, now, gentlemen, I'm certain you both heard Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu address Congress yesterday. Of course, we aired the vast majority of that address here. I had to cut it short because I want to get as much time in for our discussion. First off, Jonathan, what were your impressions of what Netanyahu said?
Well, let's start with what is obviously true, and that is Iran is an existential threat not only to Israel, but to non-radically right-wing Shia Muslims in the area. Iran must be dealt with. So for Netanyahu to have come to America to say what we already know is without question, true. At the same time, the lack of specifics in Netanyahu's speech lead a lot of people, both here and in Israel, and I've been in touch over the last 24 hours with people, a lot of people, and the problem is without a negotiation regime, and let's be clear that the negotiations are not merely between the United States and Iran. The negotiating partners include Great Britain, Russia. It includes several other nations too, Germany, France, China, as I say, Great Britain. So the negotiations that Bibi is saying are fruitless before they end, he's saying they're fruitless, and they may end up being fruitless. We don't know, but they could end up being reasonably good, are not simply about Obama and the United States and the Ayatollahs. It's about all these countries who have an interest. And so what my friends across the waters are concerned about is that there was no alternative in Bibi's talk other than what he didn't say, which is what I think he really wants, and I've said this to you on your program, Bob, weeks ago, and that is he simply wants us to bomb the living hell out of Iran. Well, because he's basically saying there is no negotiation that can work, and so what is the alternative? The alternative that he didn't say is the only logical alternative, and that is for us to go to war with Iran. Well, remember, and I'll shush up after this, remember, Bibi was a prime mover in our going after Saddam Hussein, and we know how well that worked out. And one last little thing, and that is what I think Bibi is, the problem here is that he, I think, is identifying his positions and himself with the security of Israel, not understanding. And I think this is what happens sometimes to people who have been in power in very stressful situations for a very long time. They end up thinking that unless it's himself, then his country is doomed. In Israel itself, this is being seen not so much the way it's being seen here, but the Poles in Israel, now that they've realized that this was done without the White House's knowledge, the Poles in Israel think this was a mistake, and in fact, the Election Commission was so enraged in Israel yesterday that it put this speech on a delayed broadcast and would not broadcast it live because even the Israeli population basically sees it as an election move.
Yeah, but the thing is, Jonathan, is I'm not one to take much credence in polls. Okay, the point is that here we have the Prime Minister of Israel, who, as we know, is completely surrounded by its enemies. Did he indeed bring out, the precise things? No, because you're talking national security. You're talking issues of intelligence here. Is he going to be saying, okay, we want America to come in and bomb them? No, he isn't going to say that specifically, because like I said, that's a matter of intelligence. That's all held
but
under
the question
security.
is, should we be doing that? I think in the end, the question we have to ask ourselves is, should we be attacking Iran?
But that's not what I'm trying to address here, Jonathan. And I can understand your concerns. I can understand your thing. I'm trying to get to, in what Bibi said, was there sufficient proof that this ongoing, litigation, the ongoing discussions with Iran continue, given the fact that, number one, they will not have to shut down their centrifuges. That, number two, that it's only going to be for what Bibi said, 10 years. Number three, the fact that Iran is within 6 months of having enough weapons grade material to develop that nuclear bomb. So,
well, the Mossad itself says that the 6 month estimate is a mistake. But the question really then becomes, doesn't it, that, okay, if there are no negotiations, then in fact Iran can do whatever it wants, whatever the hell it wants.
But it's not going to be able to do a hell of a lot, considering the fact that these sanctions are obviously having some sort of economical and sociological or psychological effect.
Right.
On
Nobody's against the sanctions. I'm not against the sanctions. I think and in fact, if they were ratcheted up, that would be great.
But the thing, I want to bring Fred in on this. Now, Fred,
sure.
you heard Bibi say right out that, Iran could do exactly what North Korea did in order to get their nuclear bombs. That they basically cut the locks off the cameras, shut the cameras off, kicked out the inspectors. Iran's already did it before, already has done this before. What would deter them, even under this agreement, if there was one reached, for Iran not to do that?
Nothing. And here, I'm already looking around this morning, and if Al Jazeera and Israeli news sources are calling this speech a failure, Al Jazeera's headline is Netanyahu he delivered, he failed. Looking at the big picture here, okay, this is the first administration that has taken a position of Islamic appeasement. Okay, what Obama is doing. Let me rephrase. If Netanyahu had come here with any other former president, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. But it's a big deal now for two reasons. One, Obama is thin-skinned and he is a narcissist, and the other is he is appeasing Islam and he is legitimizing Iran.
Now,
what we know is Iran cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted. And Obama is essentially negotiating with terrorists. And we don't negotiate with terrorists. The United States has never negotiated with terrorists. So the only problem with Netanyahu coming here, he did, in essence, appeal to a Republican majority, which in that sense made it a partisan issue. He didn't come here 3 months ago. He came here now when there's a Republican majority. And the Democrat Party sent a clear message by 50 of them boycotting the speech. And no one in Obama's administration attended the speech either.
You know, the one other thing, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because as I was watching the speech itself, you know, there were many vacant seats, and even Pelosi and Feinstein, you know, when Netanyahu made certain references, all you saw them, you got them up, and they just did a little, you know, silent clap, you know.
Yeah, the golf clap.
Yeah. You know, and the thing that really disturbs me most is we've had on my show, we've had IQ Al-Razuli, and we've had Dr. Nagvik on, who is a converted Muslim, that was on. And Dr. Nagvik brought up the very fact, you know, he was asked very poignantly, would you here and now renounce jihad? And his answer was no. So
No.
what guarantees do we have, given the fact that if Dr. Naqvi, a converted Muslim, will not give up jihad, and the fact you have, number one, ISIS, the Islamic State, you have the Islamic Republic in Iran, they both agree in the jihad. However, their tactics are different, but they both agree. And Jonathan, you cannot deny that in Iran's constitution, and Bibi brought it up, that they intend to annihilate Israel.
That's right.
All right.
I wouldn't even dream of denying it. That's absolutely true. But the fact is that Iran exists. And the only question is, what's the most likely way of keeping Israel secure? And my concern only, and it's my only concern with Bibi's speech, is that the upshot of the speech is in fact to have no negotiations, to have no oversight at all, in effect allowing Iran to do whatever in hell it wants, without the United States and Great Britain and China and Russia and France and Germany in this together. In other words, if these negotiations were completely suspended, what would take their place? And you can't just say, well, it's bad to negotiate with terrorists unless you have another plan, and I'd like to know what that plan is.
All right, if you listen to Bibi's speech, and I don't know if you both caught this, but I did, he said that there is room for negotiations, and the negotiations are threefold. Number one, not only does Iran have to stop its nuclear program, it has to disassemble and totally annihilate all the centrifuges. That was number one. Number two, Iran must be completely open and honest about any location of any centrifuge or any nuclear material. That was number two. And number three, it has to be perpetual, which means it's not going to be for the 10 years that's being negotiated out. Now, did he lay out a plan? Yes, he did. All right. Now, everybody out there is going to say, no, he did. He did lay out a plan.
So you're saying, Bob, that in fact there should be ongoing negotiations based on what the 3 points you're saying. You're not saying, I don't think, tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're saying that there should be no negotiations.
Exactly. I'm not saying no negotiations. But
okay, fine. And I'm with you 100%.
Okay. But what I am saying is that I have to agree with Bibi on the fact that, number one, Iran, who is a Muslim state, okay, and from all intensive purposes is going to follow the rule of jihad, and we know it's in their constitution. We know it's been said over and over again. So therefore, the 3 points that Bibi brought up, if in fact we are going to secure the Middle East, protect Israel, protect other countries in the world, Iran needs to disassemble all of the centrifuges. They need to be 100% honest. They need to do exactly the 3 points Bibi said. Will they do it? I'm going to be honest with you. Given what happened in 1979 and after the Ayatollah Khomeini took over, I couldn't trust Iran as far as I could throw them, and I can't throw very far.
Right, neither do I. I think they want me dead. I'm a Jew.
Yes.
I think they want my son and my wife dead.
They do.
Of course.
We know that.
But the question is, if you give up any and all negotiating regimes, then we're simply allowing them to do what the heck they want.
Right. If you give up the negotiating table, I am not saying give up the negotiations.
Good.
I am
Good.
saying.
And I'm with you 100%, and I'm with Bibi on those points.
Okay. Now let's bring Fred in. What do you think, Fred? Do you think, given the fact that everybody's contending, Bibi never offered a solution, when in fact he did. If you listen to the speech, and if you doubt my word, listen to it again, he did make a plan.
Yeah, he did. But even that plan, Iran's not going to honor any kind of negotiations anyway. They're not going to. We already know one of the basic principles to the Quran is to lie to us.
Right, that's been brought up many times.
No negotiations that are put on the table. I mean, Reuters is already reporting as of 15 hours ago that Iran has rejected Obama's 10-year deal as unacceptable.
See, so
what would you like to see happen, Fred?
I'd like to see 2 carrier groups steam towards Iran. Is what I'd like to see.
Meaning what? Meaning what? Would you like us to declare war on Iran?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to know where you are here.
See, this is why
I'm not going to mince words about it. We have an apologist in chief. We don't have a president that's saying tear down this wall. We don't have that now.
This is why I like this program, because I get both sides of the table. Fred, the hawk, Jonathan, kind of the dove. But the point is that we need somehow, and like I said, everybody out there has said Bibi brought up no solutions or anything. He did. It's just that people seem, and mainstream media seems to have overlooked those 3 key points he brought up. Is there room for negotiations? Yes. Can it be achieved? Can you trust Iran? No. You cannot trust Iran. And I'm not going to say you can. But do I agree to go in there and put our pilots, put our personnel in jeopardy? That would have to be dependent on, several factors. And given the war games that Iran has done recently, in fact, having a mock-up of a U.S. Aircraft carrier and bombing the piss out of it, it does make me wonder if, in fact, we do, as Fred says, we'll take a carrier group in there. Will they attack it? 2 of them. All right, if we take 2 carrier groups into that area, will they attempt to bomb them? The possibility is there. Therefore, we would be dragged in, no matter how inadvertently it may seem. And I have to agree that in the event we are attacked, then go after them. I don't care. The negotiations are done. But until that point, we need to stress, in my opinion, and I'm going to say this is in my humble opinion. Yeah, if you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn for you. But in my opinion, if the negotiations stall, which it already seems it is, we need to press what Bibi was saying. They have to disassemble every single one of the centrifuges. They have to be 110% openly honest. And I'm going to stick to those 2 points. But will Iran? Hell no. They're not going to agree to that. So
no, I'm with you 100% on that, Bob. I just also think that if you were to go ask the American people, I don't care who you get to poll them, conservative pollsters, middle of the road, liberal pollsters, there will not be one poll that suggests that the American people think we should, in effect, without congressional voice or with congressional voice, in effect, declare war on Iran.
Yeah.
And if Fred, I humbly say to Fred, what you're suggesting amounts to declaring war on Iran, and if you want to do that, I suggest you put it to the American people first.
The thing is here's my question for you. Yes, the American people currently are fed up with war. There's no doubt about it. How many years in Afghanistan? Now we got boots back on the ground again in Iraq. But the question is, here's the question. Right now, yes, America is fed up with war. But what if our carrier group is in that area and all of a sudden Iran says, hey, we're pulling away from the bargaining table. You come into our waters, we're going to hit you. And they do attack, say, even a destroyer or a frigate. And American lives are indeed lost. Will we sit back and say, oh, well, shit happens? Or are we going to do something to retaliate? Will the Americans then, who once supported withdrawal and no more war, suddenly say, wait a minute now, American lives were lost? And then
I think at that point, of course, Americans' points of view might very well change on that question of going to war with Iran. But right now, I think that's right, Bob. But right now, you don't have any sense. Maybe Fred has a very different pipeline than I do, and that's fine, but I don't have any sense at all that the American people want to, in effect, declare war and go after Tehran. I don't see it.
Well, right now, I agree with you. There is not that sentiment to go after Tehran. But if what happened, as you're suggesting, I think then it would change. I mean, look what happened in Yemen when that one ship was damaged. I forget the name of it. Blew a hole in the side of her. But the question is, once American lives are lost, America is going to say, hey, enough. And I have to agree with Fred on the standpoint that our current administration seems to be spineless when it comes to foreign policy. They are willing to give more, and more and more and more. And it seems that even here in these negotiations with Iran, we are going to allow them to be able to get weapons-grade material. And as Bibi said, in less than a year. Is this what we want? Fred, go ahead, answer.
Well, it's like allowing the Crips to get a hold of 1 million Uzis in Los Angeles. It's insanity. I would go so far as to say that Obama's philosophy on this is almost like colluding with the enemy. It's extremely dangerous. If any other president were in office right now, the whole situation might be entirely different. But like I said, that's why Netanyahu came here. Netanyahu didn't come here to talk to Obama. Netanyahu came here to talk to Republicans. And as far as literally declaring war on Iran, I agree with John. You're going to have a serious divide in the United States, because at this point, I believe half of the country would say, to heck with Israel. The conservative Christian part of America, from what I am seeing, is saying turn Tehran into a parking lot.
Jonathan.
Well, the problem is, that if we want to declare war on a state like Iran, we can certainly do it, but Fred and I at least agree on this, that America does not have the wherewithal to do it, and here's where I think Fred and I will part company a little. The reason we don't have the wherewithal to do it is because, goaded by goaded by the far right, we have for 15 years and more wasted our real potential on two wars that made no sense. Particularly the Iraqi war. And when you've shot your wad, you got to wait a while before you can re-up.
And with that, gentlemen, I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it right there for today. Jonathan, I know you're coming back on here Friday. Fred, I'm going to also bring you back on, and we're going to continue this discussion.
That's great. We should all do this on Friday.
That's exactly what we're going to do. All right, guys, hang on a second. Everybody else. That's right. Time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned, because coming up right after NPR News, Ed Till will be with you till 4 o'clock. Until tomorrow, 6 a.m., this is Bob Williams. Take care of yourselves.